Welcome to News and Views. My name is Danae Jones and it's my pleasure to bring you this week's segment. Today we're at the Hilton Cairns and we're overlooking Trinity Inlet. Hilton Cairns has everything you need with the Gin Social Bar, simply Italian bar and grill restaurant and a multitude of function facilities. Today we are joined by our very own member for Mulgrave, Curtis Pitt, and the former Treasurer and now newly appointed Speaker of the House. Curtis Pitt is a local Gordonvale boy who has risen to the top of his political career in a very short space of time. He is a dedicated family man and has 3 kids at home and is also the son of retired Labor politician Warren Pitt, so the political blood certainly runs in the family. In his time in Queensland state politics, Curtis Pitt has made his mark and continues to advocate for issues close to his heart. Welcome to News and Views, Curtis.
Hi Danae, how are you?
Good, thanks for joining us. I know you've got a very busy schedule today, so I really appreciate you taking the time out.
Not a problem at all.
Now, you've copped a lot of flack about the fact that you're no longer the Queensland Treasurer. What have you got to say to the people out there that think that that's a negative for the FNQ region?
Look, I've certainly had plenty of people come and speak to me about this and give me their opinions and their comments. I think what's important to note though is that the way you get things done, it was great to have a Treasurer from far north Queensland, no doubt, but the way things happen politically is that you need people working together. Clearly I'm very happy to be part of 4 Labor members up here in far north Queensland and we all work very well together. But it's about working together with other levels of government as well as people from different political persuasions, which I've been able to do over the years. So I think that maybe a little bit too much has been made of that. But look, I'm very proud of my record as Treasurer. I have no regrets. I did a lot of work, I think, in the 3 years that I had in the role. I handed down 3 surplus budgets, and by the time I'd finished in the role, we had higher growth, we had lower levels of debt, we had an improved credit rating, we had the highest business confidence in Australia, and unemployment was lower. And particularly here in the far north, where it was at a low of after 9 years, and we halved youth unemployment. So I'm very proud of the work that I did, but of course it doesn't mean that I'm going to cease doing those work or advocating just because I'm no longer in that role.
Yeah, and we were very proud of everything that you achieved in that role. It was so nice. I can't lie when I say it was very nice to have the Treasurer here in our own hometown. So I do understand the negativity that some people have obviously expressed. But do you think that people have lost sight of the fact that being Speaker of the House, you still very much are in a leading role within government?
I think the position of Speaker is not very well understood. I think people see what happens obviously in the chamber, and it's very important to be impartial and fair and firm for all sides, and that's a very important thing to do. But there's other elements to that role of Speaker, and those include, of course, being somebody who is a representative of the Queensland Parliament and of the state of Queensland. And I'm certainly going to be using the experience I had as Treasurer, as well as being the former Minister for Trade as well, to utilise those skills and those connections to make sure I'm championing Queensland, and particularly championing far north Queensland. And of course I've got a lot of work that I want to see implemented as well. I mean, some great things that we've been able to achieve locally: the Cairns Convention Centre expansion, which is going to start after the Commonwealth Games, the Global Tourism Hub, which I think is exciting a lot of people.
That's very exciting.
It's going to be a very, very big change for far north Queensland and build on what is already a strong tourism industry. And as a local MP, the lifeline for south of Cairns is the Bruce Highway, and over the years I've been able to work very effectively with federal counterparts to help deliver upgrades to that road. So the highway between Gordonvale and Edmonton, and duplicating that to 4 lanes, is the next big thing that I want to be involved in. So I'll still be using all of those things I've learned over the years in the new role as well.
One thing that I don't think I mentioned to you before we entered into this interview, but I know obviously with the flooding that's just recently happened in North Queensland, a lot of people would be very glad to hear that you're looking to upgrade the Bruce and make it 4 lanes. There was a bit of flack online, and I know out there in the community, with the flooding and the roads being cut off. I mean, is that avoidable? Because it was a really unprecedented level of rain that we received. Yeah. And I know there has been a lot of upgrades to the Bruce over the time. Is it unavoidable that we can be in that level of flood or rain and still be able to travel all the way through to Townsville, no problems?
Yeah, I think whenever you get bigger than usual volumes of rain or any big, massive weather event, you're going to have to contend with that, and not always is the engineering solution going to help fix that. But I think the good benchmark is looking at whether a highway or a road is cut for a matter of hours instead of a matter of days. And I think that we can all work around those sorts of things because it is unprecedented or out of the normal. But I think it just means we've got to continue to be vigilant, but also realistic that we do live in a part of the world that gets higher than usual volumes of rain, and we have pretty harsh conditions here. And sometimes we wear that as a badge of honour, but forget that it comes with a lot of other things that make life difficult, particularly when we're starting to push for funding and those things.
Now, I know in your role as Speaker of the House, you've chosen to withdraw yourself from caucus and party room meetings so that you can remain as objective as possible in your role. How has your party actually taken to that decision?
Well, look, I spoke with the Premier about it and let her know what I was looking to do, and I think people expect that if you're going to be impartial and be the independent umpire for the Parliament, that you remove yourself from parliamentary tactics. It doesn't mean I'm not a Labor MP, it doesn't mean I'm not going to be supporting the government in its announcements and those sorts of things, but it's important to not be at those party room meetings, I think, so that you can say hand on heart you're not involved in those aspects. And people should hopefully take this as a very strong move to say just how seriously I do take the role of Speaker. But there's also precedent. There's an emerging practice in federal House of Representatives that we've seen 3 out of the last 4 speakers from major parties absenting themselves from their party room or their caucus. So since Harry Jenkins did it from 2010, there was Anna Burke, there was also Tony Smith, the current Speaker. I think Bronwyn Bishop's the only one who remained in the party room. So I think it's a practice that should be adopted across parliaments, across states and territories around Australia. That's my personal view. But in the end, that's up to individual presiding officers and the parliaments.
I think it's a credit to you for making the decision to do that. I think it should be adopted by everyone as well, as I'm sure many other people out there in the community think too, because I guess we're seeing in this day and age, politics is just very different to what it used to be like when your father was in politics. This generation of politics just seems to be attracting so much scandal, and I think, and I'm interested to get your view on that. I think the more objectivity that we can have in Parliament, the better it is for everybody, don't you think?
Yeah, and I firmly believe that you've got to have the values and principles and policies that your particular political persuasion has. But that doesn't mean you play the man and not the ball, to use the footy analogy. I mean, there are ways of getting your point across which aren't about personal attacks without doing those sorts of things. And I've always tried to conduct myself that way. I had a good teacher in my father, and I certainly have always looked up to people who've been able to play the game that way, if you like. So, you can still be effective, I think, without being personal.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned your father. Obviously, he was a very big voice in politics here in far north Queensland for a long time. Do you often seek his advice and his ear when you face challenges in politics?
I had a rule when I first came into the job that I wasn't going to ask him for advice because I thought it would be a bit of a slippery slope. He has been around, he was in Parliament on and off for 2 decades, and I thought if you asked too often, it might become the thing that it would always do. So I actually didn't talk to him about those things, and we'd talk politics generally, but never really state politics, and certainly not what my job was or what I was doing or how I was doing it. So, and I think it's worked out very well in that regard.
But he wouldn't be able to help but give you some advice, surely.
He's not known for offering up unwanted opinions. It's never been his style anyway. But look, he's a great source of information, and as I said, even if I do nothing else except try to emulate the way he conducted himself, and he was the only person who was a cabinet minister under Goss, Beattie and Bligh. So he certainly had longevity, and it's an important thing to look at, to see how you should conduct yourself in the role.
Absolutely, and those days just seem to be gone in politics, The politicians that stayed in their role for such a long period of time, it just seems like those days are gone. Do you worry about the future of politics, knowing that that is what it used to be like and this is what it is like today? Because politicians just cop so much flack. I mean, basically, to do what you do on a daily basis, you're putting yourself out there to say, hey, I'm free game.
Well, I think what is, you should never think that longevity in itself is success, because you could be around for a long time and achieve very little. So I think it still comes back to how hard you work and what you're actually getting as outcomes. But really, I can see that people may have shorter political careers these days as a result of a much more intense public eye. Not only in terms of a 24/7 media cycle, but the fact is you've got citizen journalists, and social media, and so many more instantaneous ways of engaging with your electorate. It's going to be, each person will have to take their own course on that, but you can see why it could be more challenging, I think, to be around for 20 years like it used to be, because of how much is involved and how much scrutiny there is. But again, I say time is, that you're in the job isn't really the important thing. It's about working hard, getting the outcomes, and hopefully saying to people that hopefully that's what you're looking for from your representative. And I've always know that I'm there at the behest of my electorate. I'll serve them for as long as they want me to serve them, and while I'm still enjoying the role and being effective. So if ever that day comes, then that's the time I should move on.
Yep. Good answer. And so this 24-hour media cycle, how is it to have downtime? I know you were saying to me before that basically Kerry does not let you go to the local shops when you're home now, because you say you're going to be gone for 10 minutes and you don't get back for another hour because everybody bails you up in the supermarket. So what is it like? What do you have to do to have downtime, and what do you do when you aren't actually being a politician?
Well, I think the important thing is I do love my job, so I like people, and therefore I don't mind getting bailed up at the shops to talk to people. But
and that's why Kerry won't let you go.
That's right. That's right. But look, I think a few things. I think you've got to stay really grounded in the job as much as you can, and I've always believed that the benchmark for me in far north Queensland is if I can't wear my shorts and thongs around and just be one of the crowd, then something's wrong.
Yep.
But look, I obviously have. This is my fourth term. All of my children have been born since I became an MP, and so they've not known anything else. And so for me, every chance I get to spend time with them is quite precious. And over the last probably 3 years, but certainly even the last 6 years, I've had some very, very intense roles in government, which has meant a lot of time away from my local area and of course my family. So the new role will afford me a little bit more opportunity to be here, to get to attend a lot more local things, to get into my local schools, which I love so much, and very importantly, spending time with the family. And I'm a self-confessed comic book geek and sci-fi nerd, so I'm always interested in those things, and it's a passion shared by all my kids. And I guess just doing all the things I've always done around sport, with rugby league, tennis, cricket, and in recent years I've taken up judo because my son did. So, everybody's got to try something new.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, touching on in your role as Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships, in that time there was a secret report, or a report that had been kept behind closed doors for quite some time, and you and the government decided to make it public. Now that report, the Smallbones report I believe it was called, unveiled some very distressing evidence about child sexual abuse, violence and prostitution within the far northern Indigenous communities. Now, you guys made that decision because you felt that it really needed to be made public so people understood the gravity of what we were dealing with as a community. Very brave, I have to say, and I know I thought it was wonderful that it became public, as do many others. From that, we've now got a dedicated task force dealing with those issues. It's such an enormous task. How's that tracking?
Well, I think going back to the reason why it was released, some things, if they're never spoken about or never talked about, nothing will ever change. And that was really the guiding principle behind why it was released. And I asked former Justice Stanley Jones to chair the task force, and very well respected in many of the communities.
Yeah, very much.
And of course, the people on that task force have been a combination of academics, other elected people, and doers who are really about getting outcomes, and that's really what this is about. There's no point exposing, I think, what is a very harsh reality in a tragic circumstance if you're not going to get outcomes. So, I'll certainly be watching very closely that task force continues to do its work. I think it's important to note too that this isn't just about Arakoon or West Cairns, which are principally the subjects of the Smallbone report. This is something that is just an example of what is happening across the state, across Australia. Obviously it might be more concentrated in some areas than others, but it is clearly something that as a community and a society, we can't tolerate. We've got to understand why and how do we get the behavioural change so that kids in the future aren't going to be susceptible or preyed upon or have this cycle continue.
And so do you think so far they are kicking some goals in that respect, or is it really such a big task ahead of them that they're really just trying to get a handle on the situation?
Look, I think it's very slow going, but the magnitude of the task is such a profound unearthing, I think, of tragedy and that cycle of sexual violence. It's going to take a long time. But that's the thing, I think, when you look at anything to do with any general social policy, but I think particularly as it relates to Indigenous policy, is that you can't just stop and start and you can't chop and change your programs. You need that consistency. That's the way you get the outcomes, and that's the way you get that generational change which is needed. And there's no unwillingness there from the people in the communities that I speak to. It's just something that is going to take some time. But we've got to stay the course, and I hope that work continues and they're able to get some great outcomes.
And so what guarantee do we have as a community that regardless of whether it's Labor or Liberal in government, that task force is allowed to do its work?
Well, I think that task force has received support from all sides, so I don't think that's an issue, and it certainly has the support of the state and federal. I've had a close working relationship with Nigel Scullion for many years. He's someone I consider to be a friend. Yep. And I think he's always very, very strongly focused on trying to get good outcomes, so I have no doubt that will continue. When I was Treasurer, I actually commenced some work. I asked the Queensland Productivity Commission to do some work around Indigenous service delivery in remote communities. And that report has been made available for people to give comment on, and the government will make a response to that. But that was really important because it was about ensuring that we have a close look at how we're being effective or not in terms of our funding, in terms of the service delivery, and how we can actually have communities being more autonomous. So I have no doubt that the government's going to give serious consideration to that work, which was conducted by Professor Bronwyn Fredericks from CQ University as a part-time commissioner. So all these things are related. I mean, we can't just talk about the Smallbone report or the Youth Sexual Violence Task Force in isolation. You've got to look at how we're dealing with all of these matters. I think we owe that to people. Absolutely.
Now, if we can talk from a personal level, because when we talk about tragedy and personal experiences, obviously you guys as a family have experienced some yourselves. In 2008, I know that your very firstborn child, Isabel, you and Kerry lost Isabel through stillbirth. Now that was a really, really hard time for the family, I could only imagine. How do you think that has shaped you, not only as a father, because you now have 3 other beautiful children, but as a politician, and how has that shaped the way you approach things with your career and life?
Well, look, as a father, I mean, obviously all children are precious, and it just has made us value even more Tristan, Layla and Kobe, our kids at home with us. They're at the centre of our universe, and it makes it so important for us to do whatever we can to give them every opportunity they can have in life. I can say that as a politician, it had a profound effect on me. Prior to losing Isabel, I actually wasn't considering being a politician. I wasn't going to be in public life. I was in a public service job, a reasonably senior public service job, and may well have continued to carve out a career there. And it wasn't really until we lost Isabel that we had some time to think when we were grieving. My wife and I discussed it and really decided that that's something I should do, and maybe look at following in my dad's footsteps. And I'd fought against it my whole life, but then I really thought about that's something that I could do and make a bit of a difference. And I've tried to make sure that I've done that. So I've had that constant reminder, I guess, as the baseline for everything I do. And I still remember the day we lost Isabel. It was the day of expected delivery. Anticipation was really high, and basically, instead of calling everyone to tell them the news, I had to call everyone I knew to tell them that we'd lost Isabel. And that's
difficult.
Oh, it's the toughest day of my life. So I guess when you put that into context, or put that next to what you do in life in politics, every single day is a lot easier than that. So that's, I think, the way to really frame it and shape it, because there's nothing that could be worse as far as I was concerned.
Yep.
So even sometimes you have a bad day at work, or you're in the public eye for a period, or there's a campaign being run against you, or whatever it might be, that all pales into insignificance compared to, I think, losing a child and the day that I had. So, I think that's definitely had a big impact on me, and she's always a constant reminder that you've got to do things the right way.
Absolutely. So, thank you for sharing that with us. In July this year, and every year, there's the Ride for Isabel now that you and Kerry have actually founded, and all of the money that's raised from that ride is to be donated to the charity SANS. Can you explain to us what's involved in that, how people can take part?
Sure. This year it's going to be on Sunday the 29th of July, and it's a ride that we started in 2010, and it's gone through several iterations, a single day bike ride and up to a 3-day bike ride, and now we're doing it as a half-day ride, which is absolutely accessible to people of all ages and standards, and it's a really social event, and we've now in the last couple of years been making more money to support SANS generally, as well as the Walk to Remember, which is the special day that parents who've suffered loss have. It's the day where you could take the footsteps your children weren't able to take.
Yep.
And so the Ride for Isabel actually helps fund the Far North Queensland Walk to Remember, and why SANS is so important as an organisation is because it's actually all about parents helping parents. The Stillbirth Foundation, which I strongly support, are doing great work in terms of scientific and medical, and understanding the causes and undertaking research. SANS and the parents actually help parents because they've had the bereavement, they've gone through the experience, they've lived the experience, and they can help other parents, and that's why I think it's such an important thing, because that is probably the most critical thing you need as a parent after you've experienced such a tragic loss.
Yeah, absolutely. How can our viewers actually get involved in being involved with SANS, donating, taking part in the ride? How can they actually, if they've heard your story and they feel compelled to help, how can they help?
Well, look, they can certainly come along and get involved in the bike ride, and it's a great day, bit of fun. It's split into 2 halves, so you can have a shorter ride, or you can have the longer ride. But ultimately, SANS is available for direct donations. But if you go to the Ride for Isabel website, certain people can find out more. Look, it's obviously a very personal thing for me, but I'm also the state patron of SANS Queensland, and I undertook that role because I wanted to use my role as an MP to help get the message out there and help break down a few of the myths around what happens, in stillbirth and early pregnancy loss, and how people can make the situation better for parents and families suffering in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you as always, and we hope that you'll join us again and keep us posted on your Speaker of the House achievements and political life.
Thanks very much, Danae. It's been great being here.
Thank you. So there you have it, folks. Our very own member for Mulgrave and now newly appointed Speaker of the House, Curtis Pitt. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.